You're just charity! Stop! This seal is broken.
Charity cases, Monica Holt said loud enough for every mechanic, trainee, trustee, and customer in the garage office to hear. 4 grown adults David dragged in off the street so he could pretend wasting his life was noble. A socket hit the concrete. David stood at the end of the scarred conference table, grease still dark beneath his fingernails. But behind him, the 4 trainees went rigid in their work shirts, each wearing a narrow steel apprentice tag clipped above the heart. Monica's smile sharpened. 1 failed out of community college. 1 couldn't keep a warehouse job. 1 was sleeping in his car. She tapped the buyout petition, and David handed them keys to a business he nearly ran into the ground. The trust office was a glass room inside the Cleveland garage, so humiliation had nowhere to hide. Beyond it, cars hung frozen on lifts, and an impact wrench had gone quiet. At the head of the table, trustee Evelyn Shaw kept one hand on the unsigned approval page. The deadline was 3 o'clock. If the petition passed, Monica's buyer would control the property that afternoon. The trainees would be removed, the apprenticeship program dissolved, and the garage remade without the people who had rebuilt it. Monica offered David a pen. Sign. Take the money. Stop embarrassing yourself. For a moment, he did not move. Everyone read his silence as defeat, the final hesitation of a man about to lose his garage of 26 years. Then David reached into his work jacket. Monica gave a satisfied breath, but he did not take the pen. He removed a worn steel tag and set it beside the petition. David Holt, apprentice, 1918 Evelyn's eyes paused on it. Monica laughed. What is that supposed to prove? Nothing by itself, David said. His voice was quiet, but the silence changed texture. He slid the pen back across the table. Monica's smile thinned. You have no leverage. The probate filing names me as a claimant. The valuation supports the sale. Your own numbers show the garage was insolvent before the turnaround. Our numbers, Marcus, the oldest trainee, said under his breath. Monica snapped toward him. You don't speak in this meeting. David's palm settled flat on the table. Don't talk to him that way. Outside the glass room, a camera light blinked on. Someone had begun recording. Monica noticed and raised her voice for the witnesses. This is your problem, David. You confuse employees with family. You give away authority, ownership, respect, and expect everyone to praise you for it. David glanced at the 4 adults behind him. None carried his blood or last name. Yet each had stayed through the broken furnace, the cash-only suppliers, and the nights. David wondered whether he could unlock the doors again. Monica saw only charity. David knew what they had paid. Paul, the youngest trainee, closed his fingers around his steel tag. David had stamped each tag himself, a name, a start date, and a promise that nobody in his program was disposable. That small movement hurt more than Monica's words. Evelyn checked the clock. Mr. Holt, unless you have a documented objection, the board must proceed. We have 11 minutes. I have one. Monica folded her arms, then say it. David clipped his old tag to his shirt. The objection isn't in this room. A chair scraped. Evelyn's pen stopped above the approval line. Where is it? David faced the locked records cabinet across the courtyard inside the apprenticeship trust office. With the person who controls the record, he said. And Monica has spent all morning hoping I'd be too ashamed to bring it here. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Only slightly. A pause. Her hand tightening around the petition. But David saw it. So did the 4 people she had called charity cases. He walked to the door, then stopped with his palm against the glass. What waited in that office would not simply decide who owned the garage. It would expose why the business had survived, who had truly saved it, and what Monica stood to lose when the board discovered the names already written into its future. 3 hours earlier, David Holt had believed silence was the only thing keeping his broken family from falling apart. I was wrong. 3 hours earlier, David Holt had unlocked the garage before sunrise. Cleveland was still gray beyond the bay doors, the kind of cold morning when steel tools stung bare fingers. He moved through the dark shop without turning on every light, listening to the furnace knock twice before it caught. On the wall beside his office hung 5 steel apprentice tags. 4 were clean and newly stamped. The 5th was scratch-dulled by 37 years of pockets, toolboxes, and mistakes. He carried it with him every morning. Not for luck. It reminded him that the first person who had trusted him with a wrench had not asked whether he deserved a second chance. At 53, David owned Holt Motor Works in name, but ownership had felt like a burden for years. The garage had survived 2 recessions, a divorce, a supplier lawsuit, and a winter when 3 lifts failed within 6 weeks. It had not survived them gracefully. Invoices waited beneath a paperweight on his desk. The roof leaked over Bay 2. The employee refrigerator hummed louder than the air compressor. Still, at 6:15, the first trainee arrived. Marcus Bell entered with 2 coffees and a box of discount brake pads balanced against his chest. At 46, he had spent most of his working life loading freight until a back injury ended the only job he knew. "You sleep here again?" Marcus asked. David took 1 coffee. "No, you're wearing yesterday's shirt. It's a garage. Every shirt looks like yesterday's shirt." Marcus smiled, but his eyes drifted toward the folded blanket on the office couch. David changed the subject. "Rear drums on the Buick. Show Paul before you touch them." By 7, all 4 trainees were working. Marcus handled diagnostics with patient hands. Paul Reyes, 32, still checked every torque specification twice because he feared being the man who made one irreversible mistake. Denise Carter had come from home health care after 12 years of lifting patients for wages that never rose. Leon Price had arrived 6 months earlier with a toolbox containing 3 mismatched sockets and nowhere permanent to sleep. Monica called them charity cases. David called them apprentices. The distinction mattered. He had built the adult program after the divorce, when the garage had more empty bays than paying customers. Traditional apprenticeships wanted teenagers who could work for little and bend without pain. David kept meeting adults who were willing to learn, but had already accumulated debts, children injuries, and records that made employers nervous. "I gave them hourly wages from the beginning. That decision nearly finished the business." During the worst month, David sold his restored '72 Chevelle to cover payroll. He told everyone the car had become too expensive to keep. Nobody believed him. The trainees repaid him in ways no balance sheet captured. They took night calls, repaired broken equipment themselves, found fleet customers, and rebuilt the garage's reputation 1 honest invoice at a time. By spring, Holt Motor Works was profitable again. That was when Monica returned. At 7:40, David found an envelope pushed beneath the office door. Final notice of trust review. He already knew every line. The apprenticeship trust board would meet at noon. Monica's buyout petition had been added to the agenda. If the trustees approved, the sale documents would be signed by 3 that afternoon. The Garagey property had once been part of David's father's estate. A poorly settled probate issue had left Monica with enough standing to challenge the transfer, especially now that the land was worth more than the struggling business it held. For years, she had shown no interest. Profit had refreshed her memory. David folded the notice and placed it beneath the old apprentice tag. Denise appeared in the doorway carrying a tablet. The grade export finally came through. He raised his head. All 4 completion records. Every module. Hours assessments, safety exams. She set the tablet on his desk. Rows of scores filled the screen pulled from the vocational partners system. Paul had passed electrical diagnostics with a 94. Marcus had completed more supervised shop hours than the program required. Leon had retaken emissions testing twice before earning the highest final score. Denise's name sat at the top of the class. David felt pride rise beneath the pressure in his chest. "Print 1 copy," he said. "Keep the original export saved." She studied him. "Is today bad?" "No worse than yesterday." "That isn't an answer." A truck rumbled into the lot before he could respond. Monica stepped out wearing a cream coat untouched by road salt. She carried a leather folder and walked past the service entrance as though she had never left through it 11 years earlier. The shop gradually quieted. She paused beneath the Holt Motor Works sign. "I see you finally cleaned the place up." David came out of the office. "We open at 8. I'm not a customer." "No," he said. "Customers usually call first." Her gaze traveled across the bays, counting equipment, vehicles, and people. When she noticed Leon wearing a shop jacket with his apprentice tag attached, amusement touched her face. "You're still doing that." Leon glanced toward David. David answered for him. Doing what? Collecting broken people. Marcus set down his ratchet. Monica opened the leather folder. I came to offer you one last chance before the board meeting becomes unpleasant." She placed a proposed settlement on the workbench. The number was large enough to silence the trainees. It would pay David's remaining debts. It would give him enough to retire modestly. It would also transfer the property immediately and terminate every obligation tied to the apprenticeship program. "You walk away clean," Monica said. "The buyer takes possession this afternoon." David read only the first page. What happens to them? They're adults. They find jobs. They already have jobs. They have subsidized training positions inside a business you almost destroyed. Paul flinched. David closed the folder. Monica lowered her voice. "You're 53. You sleep in your office. You sold the only thing you ever loved to make payroll for people who will leave the moment someone offers them another dollar." David's thumb brushed the old tag in his pocket. She had been there when he earned it. She knew who had stamped it. She knew why he kept it. That was why she chose those words. "You always needed to rescue somebody," she continued. "First your father, then this garage. Now them." David pushed the settlement back. "No." Her expression remained calm, but the calm became colder. "The board has the valuation, they have the probate claim, they have your old losses. What exactly do you think you have?" David glanced through the office window. On the desk lay the great export. Beneath it sat the notice. And inside a locked cabinet across the courtyard rested a file he had avoided opening for almost a year. He had told himself leaving it untouched protected everyone. Monica gathered her papers. "At noon, silence won't protect you." She walked toward this parking lot, then stopped beside the 4 new steel tags on the wall. "This little family you built," she said, "it ends at 3. After she left the garage, remained quiet. Leon finally asked, "Is she right?" David pulled his old tag from his pocket and studied the worn letters. For years, silence had kept the peace. That morning it began to feel like surrender. By 9:30, Holt Motor Works had returned to its routine. Engines idled. Tools clattered. Customers came and went without knowing the building might belong to someone else before dinner. David kept moving because stopping meant thinking. He checked Marcus's diagnostic notes, corrected Paul's wiring diagram, and showed Leon how to listen for a worn wheel bearing without guessing. Denise handled the front counter, though her attention kept drifting toward the office clock. At 10, a black sedan pulled into the lot. The man who stepped out wore a navy overcoat and carried no tools. Monica followed him inside. "David," she said, "this is Grant Mercer. He represents the buyer." Grant shook David's hand without removing his gloves. "We're conducting a final site review." "There's no approved sale," David said. "Not yet." Grant's smile suggested the distinction was temporary. Monica led him through the shop as though she already owned it. She pointed out the lifts, the fenced storage area, and the rear lot, where the buyer planned to build additional service bays. She did not mention the apprenticeship program once. Paul rolled a cart out of their path. Grant glanced at his apprentice tag. "Temporary labor." "Skilled to trainee," David said. Monica answered at the same time. "Subsidized to placement." The correction was small, almost casual. That made it worse. Grant wrote something on his tablet. At the front counter, a customer waited for Denise to finish an invoice. The man watched the inspection with open curiosity. Monica noticed the audience. "David has always preferred sentiment to structure," she said. "That's why the garage needed outside discipline." Grant nodded as if she had described a known defect. The story Monica told was simple. David had inherited a failing family business, filled it with unqualified adults, and survived only because the property beneath the garage had appreciated. People believed simple stories, especially when the person telling them wore clean clothes and carried documents. David's version was harder. It involved unpaid nights, past exams, rebuilt transmissions, and 4 people learning to trust their own hands again. None of that fit neatly on Grant's tablet. They stopped near Bay 3, where Marcus had removed the front wheel from a delivery van. Grant frowned at the exposed assembly. Should a trainee be doing that unsupervised? Marcus lowered his torque wrench. "Hyacint," David said. "I approved the repair plan. You were across the shop. I don't need to stand over him." Monica gave Grant a knowing look. That attitude is part of the liability concern. Marcus's jaw tightened. David checked the work himself. Every component was arranged in order. The worn parts had been tagged. The measurements were written clearly on the job sheet. It was exactly right. "Continue," David told him. Grant entered another note. Monica's private fear had always worn the mask of efficiency. She hated anything she could not control, and the trainees had transformed the garage without her permission. Their success made David's choices harder to dismiss, so she treated their progress as risk. At 10:20, Evelyn Shaw arrived from the trust office across the courtyard. She was in her early 60s, precise in movement, and careful with words. She had managed apprenticeship grants, employer agreements, and completion records for nearly 2 decades. David had known her since she reviewed the first application for his adult program. Evelyn carried a slim folder. "The board asked me to verify current enrollment before noon," she said. Denise brought over the printed grade export. Evelyn scanned the first page. "These are completion results. All 4 finished the required modules," Denise said. "I know what they are." Her response was not unkind, but it carried institutional distance. Monica moved beside her. Completion does not create ownership rights. David watched Evelyn's expression. "No one said it did," he replied. Monica's eyes stayed on the grade export. "Then why are you presenting it?" "To prove the program met its obligations." "Educational obligations," she said, "not property claims." Grant stopped typing. The phrase hung between them. David had never mentioned ownership. Monica had. Evelyn closed the folder. "The board will address only the documents properly before it." "What documents are properly before it?" Denise asked. "The petition, valuation, probate, claim, and current trust materials." Current, according to whom, David said. Evelyn met his eyes. "According to the official record." Across the courtyard, the trust office windows reflected the garage doors. David felt the old pressure return. The file in the locked cabinet had been drafted when the program nearly collapsed. It contained signatures, conditions, and a decision made during the worst week of the garage's life. David had believed filing it quietly would protect the trainees from Monica's attention. Instead, silence had allowed her to define what counted as official. Evelyn handed the grade export back. "This can support program completion, but it will not stop a property vote by itself." Monica's smile returned. "Thank you." Evelyn's gaze lingered on David. "If there is another controlling record, it must be presented before the board signs." "I understand." "Do you?" The question was quiet enough that Monica did not react. David did. Evelyn left for the trust office. Grant resumed his inspection, but the atmosphere had changed. Monica spoke faster now, steering him toward the office and away from the trainees. For 1 second, David wondered whether Evelyn knew the file still existed. Then Paul called from Bay 1. "David, can you check this? A customer's sit-in sat on the lift." Paul held a brake hose between 2 fingers, pointing to a fine crack near the fitting. David examined it. "You caught it early. The work order only says pads." David called the customer over and showed him the damaged hose. He explained the risk, gave him the option, and wrote the added repair at cost because the initial inspection had missed it. Grant watched the exchange. Monica waited until the customer walked away. "You just gave up margin in front of a buyer. I prevented a failure. You proved my point." "Which point?" "That you don't know the difference between running a business and adopting everyone who walks through the door." Paul lowered his eyes. That was the small cruelty Monica relied on. She rarely shouted. She placed shame where other people could hear it and let them carry the weight. David removed his rag from his back pocket. "Paul found a safety issue your buyer's site review missed." Grant's posture stiffened. Monica ignored him. "This is exactly why the board will side with me." Institutions care about standards, David, not your feelings. At 11, she and Grant moved into the glass office to review the valuation. The trainees gathered near the parts counter. Marcus spoke first. "You should take the settlement." David said nothing. "You could clear the debt," Marcus continued. "We'll find somewhere else." Where Leon asked. Nobody answered. Paul had applied to 6 garages before David hired him. Denise had been told she was too old to start over. Marcus's back injury made warehouse work impossible. Leon still used the garage address on job applications because he had no stable one of his own. Walking away would not scatter 4 equal opportunities. It would return each of them to the exact door that had already closed. Denise placed the grade export beside David's hand. "She wants us to think this only proves we passed." "It does prove that," Paul said. Denise shook her head. "It proves we completed what the trust required." David studied the rows of scores. At the bottom of the final page was a field most people would ignore. Program sponsor Holt Adult Apprenticeship Trust. Not Holt Motor Works. Not David Holt individually. The trust. Monica emerged from the office before he could say anything. The board moved the meeting up, she announced. 11:45. David checked the clock. 45 minutes remained before the vote. Just over 3 hours before the signing deadline. Monica held out the settlement again. This is the last private offer you'll receive. David took the folder. Relief passed across her face too quickly. Then he set it beneath the great export and pushed both toward Denise. Keep those together. Monica's relief vanished. David crossed the courtyard toward the trust office. For years, he had treated the hidden file like a shield that worked only if no one saw it. Now he understood the truth. A shield left locked in a cabinet protected no one. The apprenticeship trust office smelled of paper-old carpet and burnt coffee. David crossed the lobby and approached the records window. A young clerk sat behind reinforced glass sorting folders into gray trays. I need the Holt Adult Apprenticeship Trust file, David said. The clerk checked his computer. Archived records require a written request. The board votes in 40 minutes. Then you should speak to the board. The board is voting without the file. The clerk's fingers paused over the keyboard. David kept his voice level. Evelyn Shaw manages the record. Tell her I'm requesting the original trust file before the meeting. The clerk disappeared through a side door. David waited beneath a wall of framed completion certificates. Most belonged to programs backed by hospitals, manufacturers, or construction unions. His garage was the smallest sponsor listed. It had also been the easiest to dismiss. 5 minutes passed before Evelyn entered the lobby. You came, she said. You knew I would. I hoped you would. David glanced toward the closed records door. Why wasn't the file included with the board materials? Evelyn's expression tightened. Because the active index shows the trust as incomplete. It was executed. I know. Then why does the index say otherwise? The final beneficiary schedule was never attached to the electronic record. David absorbed the answer. The schedule named the people whose completed apprenticeships activated their interests in the trust. Without it, the file looked like an unfinished plan rather than a binding structure. I gave the schedule to the office, he said. You delivered a sealed paper file during the system migration. It was logged, but never scanned. So the original controls, if it contains what you say it contains. You witnessed it. I witnessed signatures. I did not verify every attachment before it went into storage. David's patience thinned. Monica knows the electronic record is incomplete. Evelyn did not answer. That silence was enough. When did she find out, he asked. Her attorney requested the index materials 6 weeks ago, and nobody called me. You were sent a notice saying the trust required administrative review. Not that the beneficiary schedule was missing. Evelyn lowered her voice. David, the office cannot advise one claimant against another. I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking why an incomplete scan became the truth. Because records control decisions. Then open the record. Evelyn studied him. For months, David had avoided exactly this moment. He had feared that making the trust visible would look selfish, as though he had used the apprentices to block Monica rather than protect the program. Monica had counted on that shame. Evelyn took a keycard from her pocket. The archive cabinet requires 2 authorized staff members. Get the second. One is at lunch. The other is already in the boardroom. David checked the clock. 31 minutes remained. Bring the cabinet to the meeting. It is secured to the wall. Then bring the board here. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. The meeting has already been noticed for the garage office. The file controlling the vote is here. Moving the meeting would require consent. Then request it. She gave him a long, measured stare. You understand this will force the issue into the open. That's why I came. Evelyn walked toward the boardroom. David returned to the garage to find Grant Mercer photographing the service bays. Orange adhesive labels had appeared on the lift's compressor alignment rack and parts cabinets. Asset review. Leon peeled one from his toolbox. Grant caught him. Do not remove inventory markings. That's mine, Leon said. Grant checked his tablet. Equipment remaining on the property may be included in the transfer. It has my name engraved on it. Then provide proof of ownership. Leon stared at the cheap second-hand box David had helped him assemble one tool at a time. Monica stood nearby watching. David removed the label and pressed it against Grant's tablet. Personal tools are not sale assets. Grant's face hardened. Interfering with the review will be documented. Document it correctly. Monica approached with the settlement folder. You are making this worse. You brought a buyer into an operating garage before the vote. The board requested confirmation of value. The board requested evaluation, not ownership labels. Grant adjusted his gloves. The labels are provisional. They're intimidation. Monica's voice dropped. Careful. David glanced toward the trainees. Paul was holding his certificate printout. Denise had the grade export tucked beneath one arm. Marcus stood beside the delivery van, his hands motionless at his sides. Monica followed David's attention. This is what happens when you make promises you can't afford, she said. They start believing your problems belong to them. David faced her. They rebuilt this place. They worked here. They saved it. Employees do not become owners because they stayed late. The words came too quickly. Once again, she had answered a claim David had not yet spoken aloud. David saw the realization reach her a second later. Her mouth tightened. He moved closer, leaving enough distance that his calm could not be mistaken for threat. You read the file. I read the indexed trust materials. You read enough to know what might be missing. There is nothing missing that changes the vote. Then you won't mind when Evelyn opens the original. Monica's composure slipped, only for a breath. Then she laughed. That file was never completed. Grant stopped photographing. The trainees heard her. David's suspicion became certainty. You know which file I mean. I know every desperate theory you've floated since the petition was filed. I haven't mentioned it to you once. A car horn sounded outside. Nobody inside the bay spoke. Monica recovered first. You built an invalid trust during a financial crisis. No complete beneficiary record was filed, and no completed apprenticeships existed at the time. Even if the paper survives, it proves nothing. Denise placed the grade export on the workbench. The apprenticeships are complete now. Monica glanced at the pages. They were completed this morning, Denise continued. The final assessments posted at 8:12. Paul lifted his certificate. All four of us. Grant leaned toward Monica. You said the program had no completed participants. It didn't when the trust was drafted. David understood the sequence at last. The trust had been designed to activate when 4 named adult apprentices completed the program. At the time, none had. Monica believed the missing schedule prevented the trust from identifying them, and she had rushed the sale before the completion records could be formally matched. The deadline was not merely about property value. It was about beating the proof. Monica reached for the grade export. Denise pulled it back. You don't get to take this. Monica's eyes flashed. That document belongs to the program. I am the program administrator, David said. You are the sponsor. The trust is the sponsor, Denise corrected. Monica's voice sharpened. You have no idea what that means. I know what I completed. The exchange drew customers from the waiting area. A delivery driver paused near the open bay. Grant's photographer lowered his camera but did not switch it off. Monica noticed the growing audience. She softened her tone. David, think carefully. A disputed trust could freeze the garage for months. Legal fees will consume whatever value remains. These people could lose their pay while you fight a case you cannot win. It was the first argument that reached him. Marcus saw it. You don't owe us a lawsuit, he said. Paul nodded reluctantly. Take the settlement if it keeps you safe. Leon gave a bitter laugh. Safe where sleeping in the office. David said nothing. The offer could erase his debt. Refusing it could place every paycheck at risk. Monica opened the folder to the signature page and placed it on the workbench. Sign. I'll ask the buyer to keep them for 30 days. 30 days, Denise said. It gives you time to apply elsewhere. Marcus read the offer over David's shoulder. The figure was real. So was the threat. For several seconds, David imagined accepting it. He imagined the debts gone. The garage emptied, the trainees carrying their toolboxes through the same doors where he had promised them a future. Then he noticed Leon's steel tag. The corner was bent. Leon had gripped it so tightly that the thin metal had folded against his palm. David remembered stamping that name after closing one night. Leon had kept asking whether the position was temporary. David had told him training ends. Belonging doesn't. A promise was easy when no one charged interest on it. This one had come due. David picked up the settlement. Monica exhaled. I tore off the signature page, not the entire agreement. just the place where his surrender was supposed to go. Then he folded it once and placed it in his pocket. "I'm keeping that," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "To remember how much you thought our word was worth." The side door opened. Evelyn crossed the courtyard with 2 trustees behind her. "The board has agreed to reconvene in the records office," she announced. "The original cabinet will be opened in their presence." Grant immediately moved toward Monica. She whispered something David could not hear. Evelyn continued, "Mr. Holt, bring the completion certificates and the grade export." David gathered both. Monica blocked his path. "If the schedule is not there, you lose the offer. Then withdraw it. If the trust is challenged, your trainees may receive nothing." David clipped his old apprentice tag above his heart. They already received something. What? A place no one could take from them by calling them charity. He walked around her. At the records office door, Evelyn handed him the formal request sheet. David signed his name, then wrote one additional sentence beneath it. "Present the complete original record to the board." He returned the pen. The vote had not been stopped. The garage was still at risk. But David Holt was no longer asking the system to believe him. I was forcing it to read what it had ignored. By 12:15, the meeting had moved back into the glass office overlooking the garage. The archive cabinet could not be opened until the second authorized records officer returned, so the board chose to begin with the materials already available. That delay gave Monica exactly what she wanted: an audience. Trustees sat along one side of the scarred table. Grant Mercer took a chair behind Monica, his tablet angled toward the buyer's valuation. Customers and employees gathered beyond the glass, close enough to see but not hear every word. David stood with the 4 trainees behind him. Evelyn Shaw placed the grade export and completion certificates in front of the board. Monica placed her buyout petition on top of them. "These scores are irrelevant," she said. "No one disputes that David provided training. The question is whether a speculative incomplete trust can block the lawful sale of property tied to probate." Trustee Alan Pierce adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Holt, do you have the beneficiary schedule? It is in the original file. Have you personally confirmed that?" "I placed it there." Monica gave a small laugh. 11 years ago, during a financial collapse." 8 years ago, David said. She waved away the correction. "The point is that he remembers what he needs to remember now that the land is valuable." David felt the room shift toward her. She had documents in neat folders. He had memory-worn hands, and 4 people the board still saw as program participants rather than stakeholders. Alan addressed Evelyn. "Does the electronic index contain a beneficiary attachment?" "No." "Does it identify the 4 individuals standing here?" "No." "Then, until the original file is opened, we cannot assume they are named." Monica leaned back. "That is all I've been saying." Denise gripped the grade export against the table. "It identifies the trust as the sponsor." Alan nodded. "That may matter later. It does not establish who benefits." Paul's face tightened. Marcus shifted his weight as pain moved through his injured back, but he remained standing. Monica noticed. She always noticed weakness. "Perhaps we should stop pretending this is kind," she said. "David has kept these adults dependent on a garage that cannot guarantee tomorrow's payroll." Leon's hand closed around his steel tag. "They earned their pay," David said. "I'm sure they worked hard." Her tone made the words sound charitable. Then she faced the board. "But effort does not create title. Gratitude does not create ownership. And a mechanic cannot manufacture property rights because he is afraid of being alone." The final words landed where she intended. David did not answer. The trainees knew pieces of his life, but not the whole shape of the divorce. They knew Monica had left. They did not know she had once accused him of loving the garage because machines were easier than people. She had said it the night she packed her car. Now she used the same wound as evidence. Monica opened the settlement folder. "I offered him a generous exit, debts paid, time to retire, 30 days of continued employment for the trainees." 30 days isn't a future, Denise said. "It is more than the law requires." Evelyn's voice remained measured. "The board should avoid debating the settlement until the trust record is complete." Monica ignored her. "David refuses because he needs them to need him." Paul stared at the floor. The insult had changed direction. It was no longer only that the trainees were charity cases. Now their loyalty was being presented as proof of David's selfishness. Monica rose from her chair and faced the glass. Outside, a customer held up a phone. She knew the moment was being recorded. That made her crueler. Look at them, she said. 4 adults standing behind a man who promised them part of something he did not legally own. David's voice dropped. I never promised them something I didn't own. You promised belonging. That was worse. A witness stopped writing. Even Grant's smile disappeared. Monica continued. You found people with nowhere else to go, gave them metal tags, and called it family. Then you arranged your business so leaving you would feel like betrayal. Paul unclipped his tag. The tiny click cut through the room. David saw it in his hand. The youngest trainee's eyes had gone wet, but his expression was hard. Maybe she's right, Paul said. David felt the words more deeply than Monica's attack. Paul placed the tag beside his certificate. You sold your car for us. You sleep upstairs when payroll is tight. Maybe we shouldn't let you lose everything again. You didn't take anything from me, David said. Then sign. Monica slid the petition toward him. Listen to him, David. For once, let one of your rescues make the responsible choice. David's hand paused above the paper. Behind the glass, the garage seemed farther away than the width of the courtyard. The lifts, tool carts, and faded Holt sign belonged to the life he had spent decades holding together. The trainees were watching him. So was the board. If he refused and the file failed, Monica would say he had sacrificed everyone to his pride. If he signed, she would never need the file to fail. He picked up the pen. Monica's shoulders relaxed. Grant opened the digital transfer page. Alan Pierce moved the approval form closer. Paul shut his eyes. David placed the pen tip above the line. Then a knock sounded at the office door. An older records officer entered carrying 2 keys on separate rings. Archive access is ready, she told Evelyn. Monica's expression changed. Continue the vote, she said quickly. The record search can happen afterward. Evelyn rose. No, Mr. Holt made a timely request for the controlling file. The board already has the index materials. The board has an incomplete scan. Monica's voice sharpened. You cannot delay a lawful proceeding because a disappointed claimant imagines an attachment. David set down the pen. I don't imagine it. She faced him. You have no copy. No. No receipt listing the schedule. No. No witness who verified the names. Evelyn spoke before he could. I verified the sealing of the complete file. Monica seized on the wording, but not the contents. No. Monica spread her hands toward the trustees. Then this is over. He has a box he hopes contains a miracle. David removed the torn signature page from his pocket. He unfolded it carefully and placed it over the petition. I don't need a miracle. You need that file to contain 4 names no one can prove were ever written. David met the trainees' eyes one by one. Marcus, Denise, Paul, Leon. Their names had been written when the garage was losing money, before their certificates, before the fleet contracts, before anyone knew the program would work. That was the part Monica could not understand. The trust had never been a reward for saving the business. It had been a promise made while saving it still seemed impossible. David faced Evelyn. Open the cabinet. Monica moved between him and the door. This meeting is not a stage for your martyr act. No, David said. It's where the record becomes public. Her voice rose. You wasted your life building futures for people who would have failed without you. The sentence carried through the glass. Paul flinched. Leon stared at the floor. Denise's jaw locked. Marcus removed his own steel tag, but instead of surrendering it, he clipped it higher on his shirt. Then Denise did the same. Leon straightened his bent tag with both thumbs and fastened it above his heart. Paul stared at the tag he had placed on the table. David did not tell him what to do. He simply waited. Paul picked it up. His fingers shook as he clipped it back into place. Monica watched all 4 of them stand behind David again. Her control slipped. They are not your children, she snapped. David's answer came without anger. No, they chose to stay. That was the difference she had spent years refusing to see. Blood could explain a family. It could not guarantee one. Evelyn led the trustees across the courtyard to the archive room. David followed with the trainees, carrying the completion certificates and grade export himself. Monica came after them, demanding that her objection be entered into the minutes. Inside the records office, the older officer inserted 1 key into the cabinet lock. Evelyn inserted the second. They turned them together. Metal released with a heavy click. Rows of sealed files stood inside. Evelyn reached for a thick gray folder marked Holt Adult Apprenticeship Trust. Monica stopped speaking. A red archival seal crossed the edge. Beneath it in David's handwriting were 5 words: Complete Charter and Beneficiary Schedule. Evelyn lifted the file from the cabinet. The weight of it bent her wrist. David did not smile. The truth had not yet been read. But for the first time that day, Monica could no longer claim it had never existed. The archive room was too small for everyone, so Evelyn carried the gray file back to the glass office. This time, David walked beside her. Monica followed close enough to watch the folder as if staring at it might change what was inside. The trustees resumed their seats. The trainees stood behind David with their completion certificates held against their chests. Beyond, the glass mechanics' customers and the buyer's representatives waited beneath the fluorescent shop lights. Evelyn placed the file in the center of the table. The red archival seal was unbroken. Monica recovered her voice. A label written by David proves nothing. No one said it did, Evelyn replied. She recorded the condition of the seal, then asked the older records officer to confirm the archive number. The officer read it from the cabinet ledger. The file was received 8 years ago at 4:17 in the afternoon. Sealed in the presence of Evelyn Shaw and David Holt, Monica leaned forward. Received does not mean valid. David remained standing. Open it. Evelyn cut through the seal. The sound was small, but every person outside the office seemed to feel it. She removed the first document. A signed trust charter. Monica glanced at Grant before speaking. I've seen that. It is conditional. The trust does not activate without completed apprenticeships and identified beneficiaries. Evelyn turned several pages. Correct. Monica's confidence returned. And there are no beneficiaries in the electronic record. This is not the electronic record. Evelyn removed a stapled attachment from the back of the charter. The top page carried a title in plain black letters. Beneficiary schedule upon program completion. Monica did not react immediately. Grant did. His hand stopped above his tablet. Alan Pierce reached for his glasses. Evelyn began reading. The trust shall become irrevocable upon completion of all required program standards by the first 4 adult apprentices identified in Schedule A. She lifted the next page. 4 names appeared beneath the heading. Marcus Bell, Denise Carter, Paul Reyes, Leon Price. Paul released a sound that was almost a breath and almost a sob. Marcus gripped the back of David's chair. Denise read the page without blinking. Leon touched the edge of his steel tag as though checking that it was still real. Monica stood. Those names could have been added later. Evelyn examined the attachment. The schedule carries the original archive stamp across both pages. Stamps can be duplicated. The older records officer spoke. Not this one. The stamp number matches the ledger entry and was retired during the system migration. Monica pointed toward David. He had access to the office. Not to the archive stamp, Evelyn said. Then someone helped him. I witnessed the file being sealed. You already admitted you didn't read every attachment. I verified the page count. Evelyn checked the intake sheet. 23 pages entered. 23 pages are present. Monica's voice grew louder. He could have replaced them. The seal was intact, Alan said. She ignored him. The schedule still proves nothing. It names trainees who had not completed the program. David finally spoke. That was the condition. Monica faced him. You cannot create an ownership interest based on an event that might never happen. You can create a trust that activates when it does. Alan read deeper into the charter. Eyes correct. Grant's expression tightened. Monica reached for the document, but Evelyn placed one hand over it. Do not touch the original. This is absurd. Even if the schedule is authentic, the condition was not satisfied before the petition was filed. David slid the 4 completion certificates toward the trustees. It was satisfied this morning. Monica laughed too quickly. Certificates printed by his own garage. Evelyn examined the seals. These were issued through the vocational partner. Based on information he submitted, the assessments were independently graded. Then, where is the independent proof? Denise placed the grade export on the table. David rested his hand over it for 1 second. This was the moment he could have allowed Evelyn to explain everything. Instead, he lifted the pages himself. These are not attendance sheets, he said. They are the complete program results exported from the vocational partners system at 8:12 this morning. He handed the first page to Alan. Each apprentice met the classroom safety supervised hour and practical assessment requirements in the charter. Monica shook her head. A spreadsheet can be altered. David pointed to the verification code printed at the bottom. Then verify it. Alan entered the code into the board computer. The screen loaded slowly. No one spoke. A page from the vocational partner appeared with the same 4 names, the same completion times, and the same final scores. Program status complete. A sponsor, Holt Adult Apprenticeship Trust. Alan read the result twice. Then he faced the other trustees. The activation condition was satisfied before the board meeting. Monica's chair scraped backward. The petition was filed first. Evelyn opened the charter to a marked clause. Filing the petition does not defeat a previously executed trust. Upon completion, activation is automatic. No board vote. No discretionary vote. Grant closed his tablet. Monica stared at him. You said the sale could proceed. I said it could proceed based on the indexed record you provided. The index was official. It was incomplete. Her voice dropped. You knew there was an archive file. I knew there might be one. You represented that it contained no valid beneficiary schedule. The buyer's representative outside the glass began making a call. Monica saw him and moved toward the door. Tell them not to withdraw. Grant did not follow. Monica, the seller, cannot transfer property controlled by an activated trust. I am a probate claimant. You may still have a claim against other estate assets, not this property. Her face hardened. My name is tied to the garage. David's answer was calm. So are theirs. Monica faced the trustees. This arrangement is self-dealing. David chose his own employees as beneficiaries to block me. Alan read from the charter. The 4 beneficiaries receive equal voting interests in the operating trust. Mr. Holt retains a life management interest, but cannot sell the property without their consent. Monica froze. That was the part she had not expected. She had assumed David hid the garage for himself. The file showed the opposite. I had surrendered the power to sell it alone. Evelyn continued reading. Upon activation, the beneficiaries become the Apprenticeship Trust Board for all decisions involving the Garage Property Training Program and Operating Charter. Marcus slowly lowered himself into an empty chair. Denise covered her mouth. Paul stared at David. You gave us the vote. David shook his head. You earned it. No, Monica said. He gave it to you before you earned anything. David faced her. I trusted them before the numbers made it easy. The room understood before she did. The trust was not a clever document created after the garage became profitable. Its archive date came from the year David sold his car to cover payroll. He had signed away sole control when the business had almost no value. The 4 trainees had not been selected because they saved a successful garage. They had been named while helping a failing one survive. The file had not divided David's family. It had recorded the moment he chose to build another. Monica reached for her petition. Alan placed his hand over it. This document must remain with the board. It belongs to me. It is part of the proceeding. She looked around the table for support. None came. Outside the glass, the customer recording the meeting lowered his phone. Not out of boredom, out of respect. Monica pointed at the trainees. They are mechanics. They cannot manage property. Denise straightened. I managed medication schedules for 23 patients before I came here. Marcus said I supervised a warehouse shift of 40 people. Paul found his voice. I completed every electrical module you said I was too irresponsible to pass. Leon unclipped his steel tag. For a second, David thought he was surrendering it again. Instead, Leon placed it beside the trust file. I slept in my car when this started, he said. He never asked me to be grateful. He asked me to be on time. The words landed harder than anger. Monica looked toward David. This is what you wanted, to humiliate me in front of strangers. No. David moved the buyout petition away from her. I wanted the complete record read before you sold their workplace. You could have shown me the file years ago. You knew enough to search for it. Her eyes flashed. You think this makes them your children? No, David said. It makes us responsible for one another. He faced the trustees. I request that the board recognize activation of the trust, suspend the sale proceeding, and enter the 4 completion records into the official file. The decisive request belonged to him, not Evelyn, not the trainees, not the board. David had brought the proof directly to the people controlling the record, and now he required them to act on it publicly. Alan Pierce conferred quietly with the other trustees. The wait lasted less than 2 minutes. The board recognizes that the trust activated at 8:12 this morning upon completion of the 4th qualifying apprenticeship, he announced. The proposed sale is frozen. The buyout petition is denied as to the trust property. Monica opened her mouth. Alan continued. Because material archive records were omitted from the board packet, an emergency administrative review will begin today. No transfer lien or change of control may occur pending correction of the official index. Grant stood. My client is withdrawing from the proposed transaction. You can't, Monica said. We will not purchase disputed property from a party without authority to sell it. He left the room without offering her his hand. Monica gathered her coat. Evelyn stopped her. The petition remains. Monica stared at the file, the certificates, and the grade export. An hour earlier, she had controlled the room because her version was the only one organized into official paper. Now the record had answered her. Her probate claim was not erased. She was not arrested, ruined, or dragged away. The consequence was simpler and more realistic. She lost the sale. She lost authority over the garage, and she would now answer during a formal review for presenting an incomplete record as though it were complete. Monica paused at the door. You chose them over everything we built. David touched the old apprentice tag clipped to his shirt. No, he said. I finally understood what was worth building. She left through the garage alone. Inside the office, Paul was still staring at his certificate. Marcus placed one hand on David's shoulder. Denise opened the charter again, reading their names as though they might disappear. Leon asked the question none of them knew how to form. What happens now? David looked through the glass at the lifts, the oil-stained floor, and the faded sign above the bays. For the first time that day, the garage did not feel like something he had to save by himself. Now he said we vote together. The first vote of the newly activated trust happened before anyone left the garage. Marcus proposed freezing all non-essential spending until the administrative review ended. Denise seconded it. Paul asked whether payroll counted as essential. Everyone laughed, including David. It was not a triumphant sound. It was the exhausted laughter of people who had spent the morning preparing to lose everything and had only just understood that they were allowed to remain. The motion passed unanimously. Their second vote was to keep Holt Motor Works open the next morning. That one passed faster. The emergency review lasted 3 weeks. Outside counsel confirmed that the original charter and beneficiary schedule had been validly executed. The vocational partner certified the grade export, and the trust office corrected its electronic index to include the complete file. The sale remained canceled. Monica's probate claim was allowed to continue only against assets outside the apprenticeship trust. Her attorney withdrew the demand for control of the garage after the archive ledger charter and completion records were formally entered into the case. No one marched her through the shop in disgrace. There was no dramatic punishment. She simply lost the authority she had assumed money could recover. The board also found that she had relied on an incomplete electronic index while failing to disclose her knowledge of the sealed archive file. Her petition was marked disputed, and she was required to pay part of the administrative costs created by the failed sale. It was a consequence made of procedure, not revenge. David preferred it that way. A month later, the orange asset labels were gone. The roof still leaked over Bay 2. The furnace still knocked twice before starting. But Holt Motor Works no longer felt like a place waiting for someone wealthier to decide its future. The trainees were no longer trainees. Their completion certificates hung in 4 simple frames beside the front counter. Below them, a new sign read, Holt Adult Apprenticeship Trust, operated by the people who built it. Marcus became shop operations lead. He organized work around his back injury instead of pretending it did not exist. Denise took responsibility for the apprenticeship program and began interviewing the next group of adult applicants. She refused to use the word charity in any program material. Paul specialized in electrical diagnostics. He still checked every torque specification twice, but now the younger mechanics came to him with questions. Leon rented a small apartment 12 minutes from the garage. On the day he signed the lease, he changed the address on every job application he had never needed to send. David remained manager, but the trust charter no longer allowed him to carry every burden alone. At first, that was harder than he expected. He had spent years confusing responsibility with isolation. When a supplier bill arrived, he still hid it beneath other papers. When the compressor failed, he stayed late and tried to repair it without telling anyone. Denise found him in the shop after midnight. You know we own the problems too, she said. I was handling it. That sentence nearly cost us the building. The next morning, David placed the bill on the trust table. They voted to replace the compressor. Marcus negotiated the price. Paul compared the electrical requirements. Leon found a local installer willing to take payments. David signed only after everyone else did. That small act changed him more than defeating Monica's petition. He began sleeping at home again. Not every night, but enough. The office couch returned to being a couch instead of a bed hidden beneath invoices. One cold morning in November, David arrived to find 5 blank steel tags arranged on the workbench. The next apprenticeship class was scheduled to begin Monday. Denise handed him the stamping set. "Your job," she said. David picked up the first tag, then paused. "No." The others watched him. He slid the tools toward Paul. "Our job." Paul positioned the first strip of steel beneath the stamp. The new apprentice was a 41-year-old single father who had spent 15 years in restaurant kitchens before the building where he worked closed. He had apologized 3 times during his interview for starting over so late. Paul struck the first letter. The sound rang through the garage. Marcus stamped the next. Then Denise. Then Leon. David added the final mark. When they finished, the 5 old apprentice tags were placed beside the new one. David's was the most worn. Marcus's carried a shallow scratch from the delivery van. Denise's remained nearly perfect. Paul's had a small bend where he had once almost surrendered it. Leon's bore 2 faint lines from the morning he straightened it with his thumbs. None matched. That was the point. They had not become a family by sharing blood history or equal luck. They became one by choosing service over entitlement, responsibility over control, and trust, before success made trust convenient. Monica never returned to the garage. Months later, she sent David a short letter through her attorney. It did not apologize for the humiliation or the attempted sale. It only asked whether he truly believed the trainees would stay once they no longer needed him. David did not answer. He placed the letter in a drawer beneath the torn settlement page. Then he walked into the garage where Marcus was arguing with a supplier. Denise was reviewing applications, Paul was teaching a diagnostic procedure, and Leon was helping a nervous new apprentice adjust a lift. None of them noticed David standing there. They no longer needed to. The garage worked without waiting for him to rescue it. For years, David thought family meant being the person who never left. Now he understood something better. Family was building a place where no one had to earn the right to belong alone. At closing time, the new apprentice clipped his steel tag above his heart. "Does this mean I'm officially in?" he asked. David glanced at the 4 people beside him. Denise smiled. Marcus handed over a shop key. Paul opened the first training manual. Leon pointed toward an empty toolbox drawer. David turned off the office light. "It means we expect you tomorrow." The bay doors lowered against the Cleveland cold. Inside, 5 steel tags caught the last strip of evening light. So, what makes a family? The name people inherit, or the responsibility they choose? Share your answer in the comments. And if stories about dignity, second chances, and quiet justice matter to you, subscribe for the next one.